Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Becoming Relentless. I am your host, Eleanor McCabe. I'm an IFBB bikini pro and an online health and fitness coach. And today I am going to talk about something that has continued to come up for my athletes. So I thought it would be a really great podcast to do for everybody. And that is the holiday weight gain. So we are going to talk about how you can avoid holiday weight gain for the rest of your life. And the number one thing that I want to touch on is planning, how important it is to plan going into this holiday season. And I know we just had Thanksgiving, we're coming up on Christmas, and then there's New Year's, but there's all those days in between the holidays where there's parties, maybe your family, your friends, your coworkers, there's happy hours, there's all sorts of things that end up influencing you to kind of go off your routine. And I know that that is like when you're in bodybuilding, there's that mindset of all or nothing, and you have to be 100% on and no days off. And, you know, the holidays are for weenies or whatever it is. But I really wanted to talk today about why that is not realistic or sustainable, and why it's important, even for bodybuilders, to be able to navigate the holidays in a way that doesn't stress them out and doesn't cause long-term harm with your relationship with food or your relationship with your body or even like your relationship to other people. And so with that, I'm going to give, I think like I have 3 or 4 tips here, but as I talk, I usually think of other things. So you might even get 5 tips today. We'll see. Number one, and I think that everybody probably has heard this before, but you need to make sure that you are prioritizing your protein before you go into a party. So, or any sort of holiday event. So for example, like if you know this Friday, you and your coworkers are going out after work for a holiday party or out to the bars or something like that, don't just starve yourself during the day and think that like, oh, at night it'll be fine because I didn't eat calories, so now I can like drink and eat and whatever. Because you're going to end up overdoing it, overindulging, and you're not going to feel very good the next day. It's more important to keep eating your meals throughout the day. And then what you can do is either one, if you are able to track macros or if you want to track, then what I usually suggest my athletes do is take out the last meal of your day. Just like don't plan on eating that meal, eat your other 4 or 3 or whatever it is, and then go out and just enjoy. Because number one, you're not going to be starving yourself all day to the point where when you do go out, your willpower is gone and you just cave to whatever's right in front of you. You'll be able to make smarter choices. And also like having that flexibility built in teaches you that long-term, this is more a lifestyle than it is like forcing yourself into that bodybuilding box. And like, of course, there are definitely exceptions here. Like if you're in contest prep, then that's just not an option. Like take your meal with you. You can't do what you want. But if you're not in prep, and even if you are in a cutting phase, to be honest, like if you are not in prep and you and your coach have communicated ahead of time and you know that this choice is one that you want to make and that you can live with, there won't be guilt, there won't be shame, anything like that, then just absolutely go for it. Now, the reason why I say prioritize your protein, so if you don't want to track your meals, if you're intuitive eating or an option that I haven't said yet, you should prioritize your protein. It should be your go-to strategy during the holidays because protein isn't just for building muscle. It's also extremely effective for managing your hunger and also supporting your metabolism. Your body burns more calories digesting protein than it does with carbs or fats. This is actually called the thermic effect of food. And for protein is around 20 to 30%. So it takes, let's say, just for easy math, you eat 100 grams of protein, 20 to 30% of that in the digestive process is being burned, right? Versus like carbs and fats. I think carbs is like 5 to 10%, and then fats is like 0 to 3%. So the thermic effect of food, that means that by eating more protein throughout the day, you're actually naturally burning more calories. Plus, as we all know, protein keeps you fuller for longer. It's more satiating. So all around, like in my opinion, I feel like it is the best macro to prioritize, especially during the holidays. So for example, like what I used to do is if I knew that later on in the day I was going to go to a party or a Friendsgiving or a Christmas party, whatever it was, and like I knew that I would want some of the snacks or the cookies or whatever was there, I would drink a protein shake or I would have like a small meal of mainly protein before going because I knew that that would make me feel more satisfied and I would also be less likely to overindulge later on any of the sweet treats. So that is my number one tip, is definitely prioritize your protein. So number two, we kind of touched on this already, but I call it planning for indulgence. So I think that there's sometimes a mindset that we get caught in, especially as competitors or bodybuilders or people who just like generally adhere to like the more healthy lifestyle. We kind of get in this mindset that it's like all or nothing and that you have to be like all the way on, or the effort that you're putting forth doesn't matter. And that's just not the case. So when I say planned indulgence, that is speaking more to the mindset side of things. And I think a lot of people think that you need to completely avoid holiday treats, but that's where it backfires, because research actually has shown that the more that you restrict and deprive yourself, the more likely you are to overeat later. It's almost like your brain is trying to rebel against restriction. So what I suggest is plan ahead. If you know that you have a holiday party coming up, if you know that for Christmas, you're going to all these different places, like different family homes, friends' houses, all that stuff, plan for that and enjoy like that slice of cake or pie or whatever it is, and put it into your plan. So you're planning for that indulgence, you're planning to enjoy, but you're not just going into a situation without being mindful. And I think that's the biggest thing, is like you're giving yourself permission to enjoy the holidays in a very structured manner. So with that, like you're less likely to go overboard. And the other thing that I do like to do, so if we're planning for indulgence, the third tip is going to be adding in extra like sneaky ways of getting activity. And I say like sneaky because I also don't want to give the notion that you have to like plan to burn off whatever it is you eat. Like that's also a very problematic mindset to fall into, and it can definitely happen. So when I talk about like planning in sneaky activity, like your NEAT, so your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, you need to make sure that the energy that you burn every day doing these daily like activities, so doing chores, walking around, like all of these things, that's our NEAT. And if you're planning on indulging, what you could also do is mindfully, okay, if I know that I'm going to be going to this holiday party and like missing my training or missing my cardio session because I do it at night or whatever it is, during the day, in order to almost offset that, like choose to park farther away from the store so that you're getting more steps in, or take your dog for an extra walk, like take them outside for an extra like 10 minutes. You could also be, what I like to do is like be inefficient. So if I go grocery shopping, like I will take one bag in at a time, because then you're getting more steps, but it's like, it's still something that you have to do. Like you have to take your groceries inside the house, but you can do it in a way that gets you more steps. Or if I'm on the phone with somebody, like I'll pace outside my apartment. It's like I'm invested in the conversation. Like I'm not actually thinking to myself like, oh, sick, I'm getting all these steps and I'm doing all this exercise. I'm just on the phone pacing. But it's kind of, that's why I say sneaky, because it's kind of like a low key way to get more of that activity without forcing yourself to go out and exercise and go above and beyond, and then almost get yourself caught into that mindset of like, oh, well, I know I'm doing this holiday party, so I'm gonna actually go run for like an hour beforehand to like burn it off ahead of time. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that there are definitely like different ways that you can plan small actions in order to help like add up your activity. Just all in all, like planning out the little movements throughout your day can actually make a really big difference. So the next tip that I had is implementing the one plate rule. And I feel like, again, this one's kind of a touchy one, like it can be. So if you like, you know yourself. So if you know that giving yourself hard and fast rules is problematic because you're going to rebel or you're going to feel over restricted or you're not going to be happy, then like absolutely don't feel like these are rules that you need to force yourself to do. But something that I like to do that has worked for me in the past, that has helped me not just gain a bunch of weight during the holidays nonsensically, is the one plate rule. So if I know that I'm going to a party, or if I know that I'm going somewhere that it's going to have treats, or that I'm going to want to just like eat freely and not worry about it, I will stick to just having one plate. And I don't restrict myself. I don't say like, okay, like little tiny servings of everything. It's just like, okay, I'm having this one plate and I'm going to get the food that I want, but then that's it. And just holding myself to that. Because I think a lot of the time what happens is we go to these events and these gatherings and these parties week over week over week. And what we don't realize is that small, not meaningless. What's the word? Like mindless, that small mindless, just snacking. Like if you're just standing at the table grazing and you're talking to people, you aren't being mindful about what you're eating. And also the problem with these little snacks and sweet treats and holiday treats is that they don't actually ever satisfy you. So you can just keep eating and eating and eating. So if you can, again, be very mindful and set a boundary with yourself that like, I'm going to have just one plate of food and like whatever that looks like, that's what it is. And there's like no guilt around it. If it's a plate of cookies and that's what you want, then that's great. But you just get that one plate and then that's it. That has definitely helped me, especially when I'm like in a reverse season, because pretty much like every year for the past like 5 years, I have been in prep and then reversed through the holidays, or been in prep through the holidays. And so having like the one plate rule has helped me in just controlling that. Cause like when you're post show, your hunger signals are all messed up and you're just hungry all the time and you want to eat everything. So having the rules and the boundaries and the structure, but also not restricting myself, is something that I find helpful. So hopefully that is helpful for you. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about was managing your emotional eating. And that's something that I still very much struggle with, because if I'm bored or upset or stressed or like any sort of heightened emotion, like I definitely will tend to turn to food. And I think also it doesn't help that like with prep, you are so restricted for so long. And because I've continuously been in prep for very long periods of time, when I'm not in prep and I have these emotions and these things that happen, it is really difficult for me to then pull back. So something that I've been doing is before I go into a meal or a snack, or like if I feel myself being stressed or being emotional, I'll kind of check in and ask like, okay, is food going to help me with this? Like, is it going to comfort me? Is it going to soothe me? Or is this going to add to my stress? Because sometimes, honestly, like just allowing myself to have the cookie or the cake or whatever, it does help. Like, I'm like, okay, cool. I had that slice of cake. I actually do feel a little better and I can move on with my day. Sometimes though, like when you are in a really heightened state and then you start eating this food, it just kind of triggers you to like keep going. And I think that part of the piece of this is having self-awareness. So especially with the holidays, and I'm bringing this up now around the holidays specifically, I think it's a very emotional time for a lot of people. And that can be in like a good or bad way. It's really easy for people to view the holidays as stressful, as overwhelming, as more negative, and then you turn to food for comfort. Certain foods, like the more sugary or like hyper palatable foods, they trigger dopamine, and that can give you like that temporary hit of pleasure and like make you feel a little bit better, but it is temporary. And then you end up chasing that feeling. The downside, of course, is like with emotional eating, it becomes a habit or a pattern. And so then when that trigger happens, like the emotion, then you turn to food. And that can also then lead to like guilt, shame, and the unwanted weight gain. So like I was saying earlier, like what I like to do is kind of pause, ask yourself, am I trying to feel better emotionally? Like, how is this food going to affect me? How is it going to serve me? Am I really hungry? Like maybe you are hungry. Like maybe you're one of those people that like you feel your feelings and you're not hungry. And then afterwards you're like, oh my gosh, I'm starving. And then you like turn to the food then. So I think being able to identify like what you are feeling, the emotion, and bring that piece of self-awareness into the equation can be really helpful. And then also I did want to touch on HALT, which is, I think it's pretty common, but also it's something that I've been using with my athletes. It's like a tool for building that self-awareness, especially around emotional eating or any impulsive behaviors. So HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And like I said, it is a self-awareness tool. So the idea is that those states can trigger emotional eating or other unhealthy coping mechanisms. So being able to identify when you're feeling those things can help you pause and make more of an intentional choice. So hungry, like I think that's pretty easy. Like hungry is like a physical sensation, and it can be due to like poor eating patterns or emotional hunger or like actual physiological hunger. So being able to identify like if it's a physical hunger or if it's psychological. And something that I usually ask my athletes, like especially when they say they're struggling with this aspect of it, like they don't actually know if they are really hungry or not, is I'll ask them like, is it a craving for a specific food? And if you were to have the meal that's in your meal plan, so let's say you, I guess I'll set up like a scenario. Like let's say you eat your first meal and then you still feel super hungry, really starving. Ask yourself, if I ate my second meal of the day, like would that solve this hunger? And if the answer is yes, then you're probably hungry. But if the answer is no, because you want a specific food, then it's probably more psychological based. And then angry. So if you are angry or frustrated, like you might seek food for temporary relief. And especially I see a lot of people do this with like sugary or fatty foods. Like if you're angry, you'll kind of like go get like fast food or like something sugary. So instead, what you could do is notice when that anger comes up and ask yourself, like, what is triggering this? And what can I do that doesn't involve food? So a lot of the time, like I'll ask my athletes, like if they are feeling angry, like if they're able to pause and say like, oh, wow, I am angry. Where's that anger coming from? Because a lot of the time underneath the anger is another emotion. Anger can be more secondary. It can be like closer to the surface, but underneath that, like you might be angry because you're hurt or you're disappointed or you feel like neglected in some way, or there's like a need that's not being met. So if you can pause and ask yourself, like, why am I angry? Or like, what about this is angering me and what's underneath it? You can then work to feel the emotion and like work through it and then let it dissipate instead of just like acting impulsively off that anger. But a lot of the time, like people will turn to food with that as well. So I think being able to talk to somebody that you trust, like journaling, walking, or like bringing in that self-awareness again can be really powerful. And then, so we did HAL. L is for lonely. So this one is the one that I think I struggle with, like especially post-show. If you're feeling like really lonely or isolated, it can end up causing you to turn to food as the emotional like Band-Aid. And I think that being able to recognize that in myself and then reach out for help has been probably the number one like difference maker in how I've been able to navigate like my post show. Cause a lot of the time, like when you are in prep, when you are chasing after like getting on stage or whatever it is, it's easier to isolate and it's easier to kind of get through the final weeks of prep by just like executing and just like doing. But what that does is it ends up isolating you from like friends or family if you're not intentional with how you connect. And I think a lot of the time what I've seen, especially in the beginning of people's journeys, especially with fitness, they'll put fitness as like their number one priority, their number one thing. Like the contest prep is all that matters to them. And then at the end, like when everything's said and done, that post-show phase is made that much harder because you are feeling lonely and you are feeling isolated. So if you have those feelings of isolation or disconnection, that can definitely trigger emotional eating as a way to like fill the void or comfort yourself. So things that you can do there and things that I've done are like, number one, acknowledging it and like bringing it to somebody's attention. So like connecting with somebody, telling them like, hey, yeah, I am kind of lonely or I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling like out of control around food because I feel isolated and disconnected. That has been really powerful. And that has definitely allowed me to be a lot more successful with my post-show phases. And so, yeah, I think that if you can recognize that, like, yeah, loneliness is definitely a trigger for my emotional eating, just tell somebody that. And that will open up doors of opportunity so that the next time that it comes up, you can reach out to that person. And then the last part of the acronym, tired. So I think this one is very common as well. Like a lot of the time at the end of the day, when you're tired, your discipline and your willpower, like they're like muscles, right? Like you're probably really strong with discipline and willpower in the morning. And then as you keep flexing that muscle, as you keep flexing that, you get to the end of the day and you're really tired. And that's where things start to slip. So when you are fatigued, when you are tired, that can lower your ability to make mindful decisions and can lead to like impulsive eating or wanting like high sugary, high energy foods in order to boost yourself. So number one, like I always say this, but you need to be getting proper sleep and rest and recovery. If you're not sleeping well, I promise you, you are going to notice your hunger is going to be so much higher the next day. And I can say that with confidence because that has been happening to me this past week. I have not been good about getting my full 7 hours of sleep at all. And I've definitely noticed like this week, I've been a lot more cranky. Like I've been really tired. I'm relying a lot more heavily on caffeine and like my body wants sugary foods because it's looking for that extra energy. So being aware of what like tiredness does to you and how it does affect your hunger signaling is also important because that can be a trigger for emotional eating as well. So just being able to identify the root causes, that's why I like relying on the acronym HALT, because I do think a lot of people struggle with these 4 things. So if you do feel the urge to eat emotionally, you can take a moment to halt and ask yourself, am I physically hungry or is this emotional? Am I angry, lonely, or tired right now? And what else can I do to meet the needs in this moment? So what is the unmet need and what can I do to meet it in this moment right now? Because identifying that root cause is what's going to help you address the emotional trigger rather than masking it with food. So I think I spent like a really long time on that last point, but essentially these are my top tips for you to avoid holiday weight gain. If you struggle every year with the whole like holidays and it brings you stress and you're worried and then you always end up gaining that 5 pounds and then you have to work really hard to get it off, I guarantee you, if you follow these tips, that will not happen to you. You don't have to gain weight every holiday season. The holidays are one day, okay? Thanksgiving's one day, Christmas is one day, New Year's is one day. And even if you were to celebrate those holidays, like you have Friendsgiving or you have, nights out with your coworkers around Christmas, like even that can be mindfully approached so that you're not continuously putting on 5 to 10 pounds every holiday season and then having to work your ass off for the rest of the year to get it off. And it's just that constant yo-yo. So hopefully this episode was helpful. I love talking to you guys about this stuff. And if you like this, please let me know. Leave all of your thoughts in the comments below. As usual, this podcast is sponsored by me. I put like my time and energy into it. Like this is my baby. So it helps me a lot if you can like, share, subscribe, send to a friend. And I really appreciate you guys for doing that. So please keep that up. I did want to say like, thank you as well to everybody who shouted me out on their Spotify Wrapped. That was so freaking cool to see how many people's like top 5 podcasts I was in. And there are a few where it was just like, wow, like you guys listened to Joe Rogan and Huberman and me. That's insane. So very cool. And I'm very grateful for you guys. As always, thank you for being here. And I will catch you on the next episode. Stay relentless.